What is up, scholars, and welcome to another episode of Intellectual Gaming, where gaming equals education. We're smack dab towards the end of December right now, right in the middle of the holiday season. I hope everyone is having a good time. I know I have been. I've seen some lights, a lot of really nice lights, honestly. Uh, Food. I know most of the people in my family seem to have made a lot of desserts. My dad made cookies, which were really nice, and overall, just been having a good time, and I hope it's the same for everyone else. I know sometimes this time of year can be kind of stressful for a lot of people. You always think of it as being like this happy go lucky, chill, you just spend time with family, but sometimes family itself can be a little stressful. And sometimes you just need time to chill and time to relax and decompress. And a lot of people do that through reading or driving, running, movies. Everyone has their own way to decompress. I have a few different ways, and one of the ways I really like are video games. You may have been able to tell from the fact that I have a video game related podcast, but personally, I am a pretty big fan of video games. And one game that I've loved, that I've grown up with, is Animal Crossing. For those of you who aren't familiar, Animal Crossing is kind of like this life simulator. It's made by Nintendo, so it's exclusively on their platforms. Though it seems like everybody at one point in time has had a Wii or a Switch. Even if you don't play video games, you know what Nintendo is. And at one point in time, Animal Crossing, I feel like, was much more of a niche kind of game. I don't know how many people knew about it, but since New Horizons came out during COVID, that seemed to hit at exactly the right moment where people just needed an escape and needed to get away. And since everyone was locked up in their homes, Animal Crossing was a good pick for a lot of people, I think. I know myself included. But in Animal Crossing, you typically, at least in the older games, it's kind of changed up a little bit, but you start as someone who is just leaving town and you're moving into your new place. You're usually traveling somewhere far away, so you're not near your own friends or family. And you always move into an area like a little village that is run by little animals. Animals, there are no other human characters in the game at all, unless if you're playing with someone else who is also a player character. So you just are basically communicating with, dogs and horses and rabbits and cats, and there's things like tigers, really just like all sorts of different kinds of animals. And it's just like this really nice, chill game where you get yourself a house and you can work little jobs and you can run errands for the animals and you can fish and grow plants. You can have a little garden that you water every day, and the game itself goes in real time, which I always thought was really fascinating because you literally, if you're playing at like 2 p.m., it's 2 p.m. in the actual game. And the actual stores and things have hours just like they would in real life that they're open and operating. So if you get up super early in the morning and your store opens at like 9 or 10, you're going to have to wait until it opens. They've added a little bit more control over that in later games, but in earlier games you just kind of had to settle. And even in later games, you still have to work within the operating times. Different animals will have different personalities that lead them to, wake up earlier, or sometimes they go to bed earlier, or some animals are more night owls. And so it really just kind of lends to the sense of it being more of like a real living, breathing world that continues to exist even when you're not in the game itself. Your trees will grow, your flowers will grow, the seasons will change. If it's winter for you, then it's going to be winter in the game. There's going to be snow on the ground. There's different kinds of fish and bugs that you can catch. There's a museum where you can dig up fossils, which was always really fascinating to me, being a big dinosaur fan. But you can also donate works of art. You can donate the fish and bugs that you catch in order to create like this sense of accomplishment of, all this entire museum, like you're putting it together yourself. And that's one of the more fascinating parts of the game, is just this sense that the game kind of continues on when you don't, and it's a living, breathing world. if you turn off the game and you don't come back to it for a few weeks or several months or whatever, your animals will actually acknowledge that, and some of them will get kind of peeved at you. You'll go up and talk to them, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen you in 3 months. What happened to you?" And it's just kind of like, huh, that's kind of interesting, because it's like it creates the sense of, yeah, these animals have been living in your town even when you aren't there. And I don't know, I always thought it was kind of fun, especially as a kid, but even now it's just kind of neat to just turn it on and chill, and just you can kind of do whatever, and it's just really relaxing, and it's a good way to just kind of disassociate and really just relax your mind a little bit and just kind of calm down and just chill. And it was always kind of interesting because one of the other fun aspects of it is there's holidays in the games as well. So, when you get to Thanksgiving time, there is a Thanksgiving holiday and there is a Christmas holiday. They don't call them specifically that in the game. I forget exactly what they call them. But they're special, like during Christmas time, there's this special reindeer called Jingle who, just like Santa Claus, will come and deliver presents. And that's where he comes from, is the sort of story of Santa Claus and this idea of someone coming and delivering presents on the eve of Christmas. And he's a reindeer because, of course, Santa rides a sleigh pulled by reindeer. And so it's just kind of like a cool analogy to real world, mythology. And that's kind of something that you see as being really prevalent in the game itself. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, are some of the more obscure aspects of the game that pull from actual real world legends and myths, because it's really fascinating to just kind of see where some of Animal Crossing got its inspiration. Because it's a lot of it is pulled from, actual real world things. Like, they didn't make it up. Like, just like Pokemon, a lot of it has a basis, I should say, in the real world and the real beliefs or ancient beliefs of actual people who live on this planet. And one of the more, maybe not as well known, I don't think it's like not common knowledge, but in the American version, I think they refer to the character of Tom Nook as a raccoon. And Tom Nook is a character in the game. He's usually, at least in the older games, was one of the first, if not the first person you really talk to, aside from like Rover, who's a cat who in the original game would talk to you on the train. But Tom Nook typically would run the shop, and you would go and you would talk to him. People would be like, "Hey, this is who you need to talk to get your house," and he would set you up with a house, or I think in the newest game it's a tent. But yeah, he's a real cheapskate. But he'll set you up with a place to live, and then of course you don't get it for free, so he'll essentially set it up as like a loan. You're getting like a mortgage on a house, but you have to pay it off. He puts no time frame or anything on it. Like, you could literally pay it off over the next like 10 or 15 years, 20 years, your entire life. I suppose you could just like die without it being paid off, and that would be okay too. But he doesn't actually require you to pay it by a certain time or anything. You just, as you collect money, as you want to chip away at it, you can. Once you fully pay it off, he'll give you the option to expand your house, which will create another mortgage, which you then have to pay off to expand your house even more, and so on. If there's any one thing aside from the museum that is like how to complete the game, because there really is no ending or finish to the game, that's probably it, is just trying to expand your house to be as big as you possibly can. But Tom Nook, even though most people do refer to him as a raccoon, is actually a tanuki. So a lot of people might be familiar with tanuki, mostly because of the Mario series. In Super Mario Bros. 3, when you get a lot of people will refer to it as a raccoon suit, but it's actually a tanuki suit. So when you get I think it's an acorn, or is it a leaf? It might be a leaf in later games, but I think it might be a leaf. But when you get the item that gives him like the raccoon ears and the tail and everything, like that's actually a tanuki suit that he wears. And tanuki are real world animals, but they also have quite a bit of history in Japanese folklore as well. Tanukis have always been portrayed as being like kind of mischievous tricksters. They're also referred to as raccoon dogs, but they've been portrayed in Japanese folklore since ancient feudal Japan. You can see depictions of them in artwork and in folklore and stories. There are stories about them being kind of like tricksters and mischievous, like, pranksters, somewhat like absent-minded, but, like just kind of like jolly little creatures. I don't know how much of that folklore fits in with Tom Nook. I don't know how much of the Tanuki folklore fits in with how he is portrayed, but like I don't know how much of the original Tanuki folklore is about, you know, trying to get money, or a lot of people portray Tom Nook as being kind of greedy, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think he gets kind of a bad rap because the guy literally gives you a mortgage with no time frame, gives you a job, lets you still shop at his store. He really, like, you look at today's day and age, you're not going to find anybody that is as kind to a newcomer in a new town as Tom Nook really is. But yeah, he's not a raccoon. He is actually a tanuki. And yeah, that has a really deep dive in Japanese folklore. And I've just always thought that was kind of interesting, that they're pulling in more obscure animals that might not be necessarily as familiar to American players. Like, Japanese players will probably all be familiar with tanukis. I'll be familiar with the fact that Tom Nook is kind of derived from that name. They'll know exactly who he is and his links to folklore. Not necessarily so much in America, but it's still kind of cool to see that sort of representation. Especially since a lot of the Japanese-centric things, like the Japanese-centric holidays, are in the Japanese game, but they've been removed and replaced with more American holidays in the American release of the game. But obviously, shout out to my boy Tom Nook, who I do really think is one of the more interesting characters in the game. I always like him, and to me, he was always like a good friend. He really helps a boy out when, you're packing up and you have no friends, no family, and the only thing you get from your mom are the occasional gifts, and you get like 1 or 2 letters from your dad every once in a while, so apparently he's not as interested in keeping in touch with you. He's just kind of like, alright, we finally got that kid out of here. It's about time. But moving on from Tom Nook, another character that is one of my personal favorites in the entire game is Captain. I think in America, a lot of the times we refer to him as a turtle. I think some people think of him as a frog, although he kind of has, I think, a little bit of a shell on his back. But he's not actually a captain, and you can see that in the way that he spells his name. It's like K-A-P, and I think it's an apostrophe N-N. And the reason he's called Captain with a K is because he's not a turtle, and he's not a frog. He is actually a kappa, which is a creature that is straight out of Japanese folklore. So kappas were kind of like turtle-like beings. They would live in the water, and they would lure predominantly children, which adds a whole new level of kind of creepiness when you think of Captain and the fact that you're really a child in the game, or like a young adult, and you spend all this alone time with him when he takes you on a boat to an island. Captain, specifically, I should explain for people who may not be familiar with the game, especially in the older games, and in the newer game he was already on an island, but he would shepherd you to, or I guess he does in New Horizons, take you on his boat to the island. But he runs a boat that will take you from your mainland to a special island that you can get like special tropical stuff in. You could get, in the original Animal Crossing game, it was always summer, so you could, even in the middle of winter, you could still catch summer fish and summer bugs. And there was always a special islander on there that every game had its own unique. There was like one of 8 of them it could be. I know in my original game it was a gorilla. I do not remember his name. I remember him being kind of grumpy. But so Captain, he would take you on his boat and he would sing you a song as he was sailing, and that was kind of his role in the game. So not a big role at all, but no, he actually is a kappa. And so kappas were like these turtle or frog-like beings. They would come out of the water, and They would essentially try to lure, uh, you know, travelers or waygoers or, people who wandered too far from the village into the water so they could eat them. And the way that you were supposed to beat a kappa is to bow very deeply. I mean, it's almost like a hippogriff in Harry Potter. Because they could not resist bowing back, because kappas were also considered to be incredibly polite. Well, on the top of their head, and you can see this in the design of Captain if you look it up, he kind of has like this almost flower bowl on his head. It's kind of flatter in the game, but in folklore, it was like an actual bowl that would contain water, which was kind of like its life source. So if you bowed and then the kappa would bow, it would drain the water out of that bowl, and it would, depending on the source, either get weak or die. And that was how you could escape the kappa if you ever encountered one. And one of their favorite food, if you were ever looking for one or wanted a way to distract them and I guess didn't want to bow, were cucumbers. Which is another fun fact, because in a couple of his songs in Animal Crossing, when Captain is sailing the ship, they will be about cucumbers, or he'll talk about his love of cucumbers. So it's just like another little nod to the folklore of the creature, which I just find pretty interesting. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely a mythology nut. So I think it's always really cool when books or movies or games make references to like actual folklore and mythology that people, actually believe in, and you can make like these little connections to human history, which I think is what education is kind of all about, is just this, making connections and, studying the past and learning from them. And it's cool that even in a game like Animal Crossing, you can still find these little nods to just human history and human belief. And even if they aren't that great, and maybe not even that widely known, that's why we study these things, is to learn and to grow from them, and to maybe open your eyes to concepts that you didn't know about before. And it can just maybe inspire you to want to do a deeper dive into some of this stuff and see what other little nods you'll find in Animal Crossing. Another one of my favorites are the gyroids. So they are, for anyone who hasn't played Animal Crossing before, gyroids are things that you can dig up in the ground, and they look like little clay statues with like these big empty eyes and like a big empty mouth. So it kind of looks almost like two black holes for eyes and a big black hole for your mouth. I would definitely recommend looking it up just to get a good visual as to what they actually look like, because they're kind of interesting. And then when you can sell them, or you can place them in your house. And if you place them in your house, they move, and each one makes a different kind of sound. So they almost play like their own music. They're one of my personal favorite things just to kind of collect different versions of and see. You can find them usually after it rains. Like, you can always find them under the ground. Like, when you're walking around your little town, you'll see like a little, kind of like an X in the dirt almost. Like, it looks like a little crack basically, but it's kind of shaped like an X. And that indicates that there's something there that's buried. It can sometimes be pieces of furniture. A lot of times it'll be fossils. And sometimes it'll be a gyroid. But after it rains, that's when a lot more of them typically pop up. But gyroids have a really interesting bit of history, because they are actually based off of the Hanawa. And the Hanawa are ancient Japanese figures that were used essentially as like ritual rites, and they were buried with the dead as funerary objects. Way back in like the 3rd century, during the Kofun period of Japan. Hopefully I'm pronouncing all of these right, and if I am not, I do apologize. I definitely accept anyone to like message me or leave a comment letting me know like, hey, you screwed up that pronunciation, because I'm sure some of them I will get wrong. But they were created essentially just almost as like burial markers. I don't know if anybody is completely sure like what every use for them were. They used to be buried inside the graves themselves, but then later on would be kind of buried outside of them. So most people think that they were used to kind of be burial markers, and also to help ward off evil spirits or yokai who might try to, mess with those who are supposed to be at rest. So already, you can kind of see the connection there with why, with the gyroids, you actually have to dig them up from the ground because that's what they are. They're for funerals, they're for memorializing the dead. But another kind of fun tidbit is the fact that every single gyroid in all the games you sell for 828 bells. Bells is the currency in the game. And the reason why, like, there's actually a significant reason why it's 828 bells, because you might think, that's kind of an oddly specific number, and it is. The 828 bells is a reference to the Japanese pronunciation of 828, which is, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but Hapyaku ni ju hachi. So if you take some of the syllables in that, they spell Hanewa. And that's kind of like where they derive that from. So it's essentially a reference to the fact that they are from, that they are references to Hanewa. And I believe they changed the name because I think in the Japanese game, they are actually still referred to as Hanewa, and it's made much more apparent that that is specifically what they are. And I do remember in the original Animal Crossing, back when you didn't really have, consoles that really were prevalent in connecting to the internet, you could actually travel to another person's town, and you had to do this through a really convoluted way. But you had to take someone else's memory card, put it into your memory card. You could take the train. You had to have this whole conversation with Rover while you were traveling to the other person, and then you finally would arrive in someone else's town. I guess it's not that convoluted. It was just more time consuming. But you arrive in someone else's town, and if you were to just shut the game off without going back to your town and saving and everything, then when you loaded your game back up, you would essentially have a gyroid or a Hanawa face on your face. So your face would be wiped away, and you would just have two really big black, almost like holes as your eyes, and then one really big black hole in, as your mouth. There's been all sorts of theories as to what exactly that means and why you look like that, because it almost certainly was a deliberate choice in the game. And I have no idea. It certainly gives you nightmare fuel if you're a kid, and that's what happens, especially because it was pretty prevalent for something to happen with your GameCube or for power to cut out or whatever. So it could almost be kind of dangerous to travel to another person's town like that. But yeah, you load it up, and then it's like, oh, you've got essentially the face of a Japanese funeral tombstone. And so it's just kind of like one of those interesting little fun creepy things that Nintendo likes to add. I know Nintendo has a reputation of essentially being, quote unquote kids company that makes quote unquote kids games, but they do not shy away from the creepy and the weird sometimes. And it's really easy to just kind of think why the hell did they do that? I don't think anybody will ever really know, but it's just another fun little tidbit as to something that you can find in Animal Crossing that's just another reference to folklore in real life. I don't know how many people who've played Animal Crossing really like the gyroids. I know some people find them annoying, or some people it's it's just a way to sell. It's something new you can do, or it's something that you can take to, just make as much money as possible. They don't really put them in their house. I do know some animals, when you go into their houses, you will see gyroids, so it's not just the human character that collects them. There's something that the animals collect as well. But I always thought they were just kind of fun little things, and especially knowing the history behind them and knowing they have such a significance to Japanese culture, and especially something, I don't know if you want to say dark, but something that's, maybe not necessarily as childish as you would expect in a game like Animal Crossing. It's kind of just fun to see where Nintendo got their inspiration from. So another reference, and this is specifically more in New Horizons. I don't think the older games did this, if I can remember. If I'm wrong, definitely correct me. But in New Horizons during April, there's a week where there is actually a cherry blossom season, which is another big aspect of Japanese culture, is they very famously have this cherry blossom season. And in the game, that a lot of the trees will turn pink, and you get special DIY recipes where you can like craft special items that are in reference to the cherry blossoms. And it's just like this cool little bit of Japanese, culture that again might go over the heads of some people because you don't necessarily notice it, but it's just kind of cool to see again so much of the game has pulled from Japanese culture and is exposing a lot more of that to America, to people who might not necessarily otherwise be that familiar with Japanese culture and Japanese practices and Japanese folklore. And I always enjoy like little references like that, and especially in a game like Animal Crossing, it's so cool to just see things pulled from different places. And just like Pokemon, it's really fun to just kind of take a look and see where all these references come from, because a lot of them come from somewhere. Another fun character, and who might be my favorite from just like a character standpoint in terms of like the set characters that you always encounter in Animal Crossing, is Crazy Red. Crazy Red is he's another shop owner, or in later games he's like an art dealer, and he's not usually always in your town. He'll come periodically, just kind of depending on I can't remember, he always has a set day, but you can always usually find out when he's due to arrive. But one of his biggest traits is he can sell you art, and the artwork that you can donate to your museum, this is usually the way to get it. But the problem is, a lot of the times, like, the art he sells is actually going to be fake. So you have to, and this is another fun part, is all the art in the game are based on real world paintings and sculptures. And if you're familiar with the art in real life, you can typically tell what is real, what is fake. Like the Mona Lisa picture, you can tell the real one pretty easily because the fake one has her tongue sticking out. Some of them are not so obvious, but all the art is, it'll either look like how it does in real life, or there'll be something different about it where you kind of have to be familiar with the art in order to get it. Or you can do what I usually do and just Google it, because that is way easier than buying the fake art, realizing you can't donate it, you can't sell it for much, and then just kind of being, stuck with, not donating a piece to the museum until Red decides to come around again, and hoping you get a good piece of art. But Red is a fox, but he's specifically a reference to a kitsune, which is kind of like a yokai, a mythical fox. Usually they're portrayed with more than one tail, although I do think Red has only one tail. But in mythology, a lot of the times they are portrayed as tricksters. Kitsune are also where Nine Tails in Pokemon, that's the same source of reference. And that's where you get like the multiple tails, because a lot of the times Kitsune will have more tails, specifically 9. But I believe they can just kind of range from 2 tails, up to 9, or possibly more. But that's where Red gets his like mischievous nature from, as well as a lot of folklore surrounding foxes being kind of like sly, mischievous creatures, which is also found in European and American folklore as well. So it's just another aspect where they took a character and formed him around the animal that they based him off of. And I will say, it's always fun when you actually get the real piece of art, because then you can donate in your museum, and if you donate the piece of art to your museum, it'll actually give you a little description of that piece of art and kind of like where it came from. And you can do that with the fossils as well. Once you complete a complete fossil, a lot of the dinosaurs will be in 2 and 3 parts. So like if you're digging and you get a fossil and you have to get it appraised in order to tell what kind of bone it is. But it'll be, usually like a triceratops head, and then you'll also have to get the torso and the tail. But once you complete an entire skeleton, you go and you can read a little description in the museum, and it'll actually teach you a little bit about that dinosaur. So it's not like you're just putting this stuff in the museum itself, but it's actually creating a museum where once you complete it, you can actually, just like you would in a real life museum, learn about these things that you are donating. And it just adds to that sense of accomplishment and just kind of like awe, or at least to me it does, where you can actually go to your museum and actually treat it like a real museum and learn about these things as you're putting it together. Or, if you're bored and you just want to chill a little bit, you can just wander over to your museum and just look around like you would any other museum. And another kind of like little tidbits in New Horizon. In August, you can go and you can purchase an outfit. I think there's actually 2 outfits that celebrate Cowherd and Weaver Girl Day, which is a reference to the Tanabata Festival in Japan. The Tanabata Festival, which is also called the Star Festival, is a festival that is all about this Chinese folktale about separate lovers that can only meet up once a year. And you can actually buy 2 outfits, a guy's outfit and a girl's outfit, that reference that folktale. And it's one that I'm willing to bet a lot of people in America maybe never even heard of, but you can actually still participate in this festival even though it's predominantly a Japanese festival that's based on a Chinese legend. And so it's just another cool little touch where there's just so much folklore and so much added into this game that just reference the real world, almost to the point where you could see Animal Crossing is taking place in the real world, even though, to my knowledge at least, there isn't anywhere in the real world where you can go and live on an island that is just full of anthropomorphic animals. Although that would be pretty awesome, and I would be buying a one-way ticket straight to there if that were the case. But another part of that festival is you can buy yourself bamboo grass, which is the Animal Crossing name for a Tanzaku tree. And during the Tanabata Festival in Japan, people will actually write wishes that they have on Tanzaku, which are small colored pieces of paper, and hang them up on a tree. And you can actually do that in Animal Crossing. You can interact with your tree that you get and read some of the wishes that people have made, which is just kind of another cool little touch. It's just just fun little things that, I don't know how many people find this stuff super interesting, but I love little touches like this because it just makes the game feel not only more authentic, but you're actually learning so much if you do a deep dive. You might not know too much about these festivals just by playing the game, but if it gets you interested and then you start doing your own research to do a deeper dive, because this is just kind of scratching the surface. The Animal Crossing series is so rich with references and different characters and things that are references to folklore and items that are references to things in real life, and it's just really, really cool to kind of see where all this actually comes from. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. I probably won't take up any more time on this particular episode. But if you have any other references or things that you find really interesting that I didn't cover on here, definitely feel free to comment. I always find it interesting because I'm sure there's things that I don't even know about that are in this game. I'm not entirely sure yet what my next episode is going to be on. I've got a couple of ideas of what I think I'm going to cover. But I hope you guys all have a great holiday season. And, whatever holiday you celebrate, I hope you have an absolutely great holiday season as we're moving into the next year. I hope you're spending a lot of time with family and that it's stress-free and hopefully just a good, chill, easy time. And yeah, happy studying.